Hi everyone, welcome. This is Michelle from Sacred Moon Astrology, and I wanted to take you through the transits for the week ahead, including this full moon that's coming up in Pisces. So right now, as you can see, we are actually looking at Libra rising, Venus ruling with Venus in Libra. Wow, conjunct the ascendant. What a sweet, sweet time to be recording a video. I have some candles lit and have really just, love to actually be sharing more and more information with the public and on YouTube and putting things out there and stretching outside of my comfort zone and doing all of that, and really looking forward to getting feedback and hearing from folks what it is that you want to learn and to know. I've been doing readings now for the past year and have been studying astrology for the last 15 years, really for my own purposes. And then about 2.5 years ago became a voracious student of astrology and started studying with Adam Sommer of Exploring Astrology. Did his year-long apprenticeship last year. And then after finishing studying with Adam Sommer, I started more recently studying with Adam Ellenboss. So I, for some reason, have a thing about studying with Adams, and that those two men have been influential in my astrological wisdom, as I'm also just beginning to learn Vedic astrology with Kathy Coleman here in Sonoma. So the one thing I love about astrology is that there is so much to learn and so much that I feel I could spend the rest of my life really learning, understanding, and mastering this beautiful art of science and meaning and psychology and transformation and magic and many, many different ways in which we can use this tool, this lens of astrology, and how valuable it can be just in our everyday human life. So I think of the planets, especially the personal planets like Venus, the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Mercury, as being more representative of our daily and mundane lives. And then the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, as they get progressively more slow moving, the intensification of their representing the more collective, long-term, deep-seated systems and beliefs and stories and traumas and energies. And particularly when I'm working with a client and looking at a birth chart, I tend to really look at and want to unpack the life's traumas that come up, that arise for the purpose of healing. I really believe that every person put on this planet at this time has their own sacred responsibility for healing, their own storyline that they're working in their lifetime, in a family lineage, in a personal story, in a collective story that really is about healing something that's needing healing on the planet. And that when trauma arises in our life experience, it's really a part of our story and our healing, that we chose this body and this life and this time, and we've been given the gift of this particular trauma. And I know from much very personal, intimate experience with trauma that it doesn't often feel like it's a gift that's been handed to us. In some ways we can, and if we are willing to take the lens of seeing that trauma as a sacred responsibility, then we can start to work with it. And I really just feel that particular view can be so powerful. Like this trauma here that has been happened in my life, this is my sacred responsibility to heal. And my wish for every single person on this planet would be that we would live in a world where trauma was not existent. Wow, that makes me want to cry. But we don't. Right now we live in a world where trauma is a deep part of the culture, and our human pain is a deep part of our daily experience. It's hard to not, especially in the lens of Pisces and the Grand Trine in water, that we have had ongoing, particularly Jupiter in Scorpio, magnifying the deep collective wound, and Neptune in Pisces, magnifying, like I think of the opioid epidemic that's ongoing in our nation right now, and people, and the addiction to being addicted, the addiction to numbing out, whether that's using substances, whether that's using television or the phone or anything that can be abused. Neptune, representative of that collective addictive nature, the illusion and the delusion of our society that we're not seeing clearly what's true and what's not true. These like really big, and Jupiter in trine to Neptune, like this magnification of the delusion in the world is painful if you're aware of it. It's painful to be connected to how big the trauma is in the world right now. And yet when you see this as like a sacred responsibility, and then when it becomes like Chiron in the story, the wounded healer, and where his wound becomes like the gift of his life and his teaching, because he becomes such a masterful teacher, and he works with all the different elements of nature in order to master healing. And we've just seen Chiron move into Aries in this last year, and it's really just the beginning of understanding what this is about. And if I recall, the last time Chiron was in Aries was back around when it was discovered. That it's been in Pisces for quite a long time. So we've all been through the sort of Chiron and Pisces era, and a lot of what is coming through this summer of retrogrades is a bit of like Chiron is retrograde, Neptune is retrograde, Uranus is retrograde. What else is retrograde? Saturn is retrograde. Mars is retrograde. Pluto is retrograde. And so with all these planets moving backwards, they're not actually moving backwards in reality, but the energy, I heard this described as like the shift from primary motion to secondary motion and back. So like when a planet is shifting gears or shifting energies, there is a change in the way that it shows up in our daily life. And so with all of these planets moving in this particular way throughout the summer, really, it's like if I have the transit set to a month. So if we just click forward, you can see that Chiron's going to move back to 28 Pisces, where it was a lot of last year. The nodes are going to move. The nodes are always moving retrograde. The nodes are going to move into Cancer Capricorn in a few months, and Juno will be retrograde at that time. Uranus will be retrograde. Like, look at this date, November 21st. We have the nodes at 29 degrees. We have the sun at 29 Scorpio. We have Uranus at 29 Aries. We have Chiron at 28 degrees Pisces. And so that's like something to keep an eye out for. But as we're going through this, moving through all these stages of retrograde and direct, forward motion, backward motion, what I like to say is that these parts of our life are under review. And so in particular to this Pisces full moon, which is bringing the light of illumination to the sign of Pisces, it'll be in the early degrees of Pisces, sun and the moon in opposition to one another. So in this Pisces Virgo axis, if you think back to a few years ago, the nodes, I guess it would be now like about 2 years ago, the nodes were in Virgo Pisces. So there may be something from way back or from a few years back that is illuminated, that's coming to completion. There may be something in the last 3 months or the last 6 months, because these moon cycles follow 6 months from the last new moon in Pisces to the full moon in Pisces. And also it could be very well that the cycle is completing from something that came about in the new moon last month. So just like looking at your life and looking at what are these areas that are under retrograde, that are under review. So this would be the Capricorn house, the Aries house in your birth chart. So depending on what your rising sign is, will make the placement of the houses. If you know your time of birth, exact time of birth, that's how you can determine the rising sign and then place the houses. And I'm using whole sign houses here to look at this chart. The Taurus house, which will actually also dip back into the Aries house. So these houses have had some review, some sort of backtracking, some revisiting from the past or going back over things, and also the Aquarius house. I know Mars has just dipped into Capricorn back at 28 degrees Capricorn, but when Mars stations direct next week, then we will actually have Mars moving back over the Aquarius areas of the chart that he walked through. So, for example, I'm just going to move this forward a couple of days. We have our full moon on the 26th. And that'll be, let's see, earlier in the morning, I think around 7 a.m. There we go. There's our full moon right there. And interesting that the full moon happens in the time of Leo rising. For those, those last several lunations where we had Leo eclipse, everything happening in this Leo Aquarius axis, where the nodes have been for the last 18 months. So just bringing your attention to what area is really receiving the light of this full moon. In this particular chart, if you were a Leo rising, which I am a Leo rising, then that puts the full moon in the 8th house, house of intimacy, death, taxes, shared resources. And it also puts Uranus right conjunct the midheaven at the top of the chart, retrograde, Juno, 22 degrees Taurus, Venus at 18 degrees Libra, Jupiter 16 degrees Scorpio, which has been in this trine here with Neptune for some time, and Mars right on the cusp here at retrograde, still at 28 degrees of Capricorn. So then what happens in the next day as we move forward through the weekend is that the moon will conjunct Neptune, wrap up in Pisces on Tuesday. So all that time, if there's some full moon ritual that you like to do, you could do it over the weekend, really Sunday, anytime Sunday, Monday, early morning, or before the moon leaves Pisces on Tuesday, moves into Aries on Wednesday of next week. And at that point, Mars is direct and is moving direct. So, and the sun has ingressed into Virgo. Venus at 21 degrees Libra by next week. So I am looking at making this a regular thing, doing a week ahead of just looking at the chart. So from Tuesday to Tuesday. And if this is something that you enjoyed, if this is something you'd like to see more of, please do let me know. Put it in the comments below, or send me a message on Facebook or YouTube. I look forward to hearing from you. If you'd like to get a personal reading with me where we can go deeper into your birth chart, looking at the transits of what's happening in your life right now, or simply like looking at any of the family trauma, collective trauma that you're working on in your life, I would invite you to reach out and schedule a reading. There's information on my website, sacredmoonastrology.com, on how to book a reading and what we cover in a reading. I look forward to connecting with you. Really, the one-on-one work of astrology is by far my favorite part of this work. So please do reach out and let me know. Many full moon blessings to you. I look forward to crossing paths.